Hello and welcome to the training tutorial on using the time clock feature of Easy 2000 Plus dental software. Employees can use the time clock to clock in and out of work. Before using the time clock, the following items must be set up. You got to set up your employees, which would actually be under lists employees. So you've got to set them up. We'll go over that. You got to set up the user profile for each employee in the security. So if you go to set up security, you'd have to go through every user and make sure that you go through the time card setup and allow them to edit all time cards, allow them to delete a time card or not. Give them those permissions. It's something you might want to consider. And of course the time card setup for the pay periods. So we'll go through all that, but once you've set all that up, and we'll come back to that, you'll be able to use the time clock. The time clock module is used only on one computer, that of the server computer. You would go to Manage from the main menu, and in the right top section, in this quadrant, in this sector, or this grid, called Time Clock, it lists the employees that you've previously set up. Right now, let's assume it's the beginning of the day. Everybody's at home. Helen Smith is at home. She hasn't come to work yet. Henry Jones, Mark, Mary, they're all at home. That's their status. Let's say Helen Smith is the first person that comes in. She's, let's say, the office manager. And, well, it's showing the correct time now which is 2:35 p.m. Let's say we had a late start today. And we're going to clock her in. So she's now clocked in. Her status is showing working. Okay? Mary Jones, the hygienist, comes in next, and we clock her in. It shows working. Then the first doctor comes in. Let's say Henry Jones. Clock him in. He's working. And then Mark, clock him in. Everybody's here, present and accounted for. Now, Mark, being the boss, decides he's been here for a whole minute, or not even that. Time for a break. Well, you have to click on break and clock out for the break. Okay, now if I clicked on Mark and clicked on view breaks, it's going to show that on Friday, July 10th, 2015, he clocked in at, well, actually it's showing here that an earlier entry that I clocked out at 1:05 and clocked back in at 1:30. That was before I even recorded this training session. But right now, he's clocked out for a break at 2:35. So I'm going to close that. Okay, now, each day that you check in and check out, a clock event row is created in your time card. So if I go into Mark Shaneberg and I view the time card, it's going to show a separate row. I first checked in at 12:58, checked out 12:59, I was in for 1 minute. Then 12:59 I was back in, and I said, oop, I'm back out again. So that's showing as a 0. Back in at 1:05, back out at 1:29. Okay, so it's showing 0.4. Now this is a decimal. This is not minutes. You can change the way the time is shown from decimal format, which is called the decimal system, right? From 0.1 to 0.9, or 0.0 to 0.9, or you can show the time format, which is with a colon. So let's say I wanted to change to that format. We can go through that and show you how you can show the hours. For example, 3/4 of an hour, let's say 45 minutes would be 0:45 instead of 0.75. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it's the same idea. Now, let's go back and say we wanted to set up the employees. So we're going to go to Lists, Employees, and we've got Helen, Henry, Mark, and Mary, right? So let's just go with Mark Shaneberg. It shows the name. You can put the title also, the first name, and if you want to put a payroll ID, you can. Let's say that employee is no longer working here. You can click Hidden. You can't delete it. You can, but then it'll delete all their records. Very dangerous to do that for auditing purposes. Better to keep them as hidden for a while, at least till you're sure the employee's not coming back and there's no problems with their information. Okay, Now, the next thing is the security, which we already went over. You've got to go to setup, and you've got to go to security. And for each user, for example, Helen Smith, you want to denote whether under the time card setup, they can either edit all time cards and or time card delete entry, or not check in either of them. And then they'll just be able to clock in and clock out, but not correct errors like here. Okay, and you can play around with that, experiment with that. Now, let's go and into time card manage. So we're going to go to the manage module right here. So you're in this manage, which takes you into this screen to show this grid for the time clock. But then let's go to each employee now. Let's go start with Helen Smith and go to manage. Actually, it doesn't matter who you've selected. It's going to manage all of the employees. So as you can see, all 4 employees are shown here under the employee list. And there's various things you can do here. Let's see. The pay period. The pay period, you can click the left and right arrows. We only have one pay period since I started this today, July 10th, 2015. The pay period, you can go back and forth amongst pay periods. The pay periods we've defined are 2 weeks. This particular pay period is July 10th through July 24th, which is 14 days, 2 weeks. And the paycheck date is going to be 4 days after the end date, which in this case is July 28th. So again, you can click the left, right arrows to move back or forward, to move forward or back. In a pay period, the dates will automatically change to reflect the pay period. The clear manual adjust on the top right here. It will clear any manually entered adjustments made to a clock event for selected employees. The clear auto adjust will clear any daily or weekly adjustments made when the daily or weekly is clicked. The total hours is the total hours worked, the total number of hours worked, regular, overtime, and differential. And in the pay period, you can set up what the regular hours are, like let's say 9 to 5 is considered regular hours. So then if they worked 8 hours or 6 hours, it would show 8 or 6 as the total of the regular hours. But then let's say you want to differentiate the overtime hours or differential hours. Differential hours would be, let's say, if they came in before the start time. So if your start time is 9 to 5 and they worked from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., you might want to denote that they worked an hour, 2 hours, whatever, on a special rate. So when it comes to paying the payroll, they're paid at time and a half or time and a quarter or double time or whatever. Same thing with the overtime. And you can set all those rules in the pay period that we showed you before. Now, the rate number 1, therefore, is the regular hours that are worked, let's say 9 to 5. The rate number 1 overtime would be the number of regular overtime hours worked based on the rules set up in the time card setup. We'll go back to that in a minute. The rate number 2 would be the differential. So you can't have both. It's either you pay people overtime or you pay them differential time. We'll go back to that in a second in the time card setup. The rate 2 overtime is the number of overtime differential hours worked based on the rules set up in time card setup. Now it sounds a little confusing, but we'll review all these a little later. Now the notes are clock event notes and any errors that need to be fixed before running the calculations. So the calculations for daily and weekly are run down here, and then you print the payroll reports, etc. Now let's get into that. Well, let's back up for a second, because some of you are confused. And let's go back into the setup of time cards. This is the pay period, and these are the rules. Now notice the rules, I've already set them, but you can set them whatever you like. You can either set them by employee or for all employees, so that, let's say in this case, all employees, Helen, Henry, Mark, and Mary, none have rules of overtime, but they do have differential, which means we will pay you a different rate, typically higher rate than your normal salary, which is between 8 and 5 p.m. Okay, 1700 is Army time, which is 5 p.m., 12 hours plus 5, so it's 1700. 8 o'clock is 8 a.m. Or you could say 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., whatever time you start. Let's just say 9 to 5, okay? And you could also change it to overtime instead, but we'll keep it at 9 to 5 as the regular day. So therefore, differential hours would be any employee that works before 9 a.m. So if they work from 8 a.m. to 5, that would mean they're going to be showing on their time card 1 differential hour and 8 regular time hour. Okay, regular pay hour. If they work from 9 to 7, it would show 8 regular hours and 2 differential hours. Now, you can separate it by employee and say for Helen, she works with differential. With Henry, he works different hours. Mark, different hours. So you can do that, and that will determine what goes into, when you go here and you look at, let's say, Mark, that will determine what goes into this box over here for regular time, overtime, and the second rate. Okay. Now, let's get out of here and back to the manage. Back to the employee section. Now, in order to run your calculations, you would click on the manage, okay? And from the time card manage screen, time card manage, you're going to go down to the calculation section on the bottom, daily, weekly. Now, the daily let's see. We recommend running the automated daily and weekly calculations at the end of every pay period. Before calculating, you're going to add any adjustments, and we'll go over what that means in a second, and any corrections of any time card errors. Now, let's assume we don't have any adjustments, we don't have any errors, but we will go through what that means later. Let's go right to the daily calculations, which is the bottom left corner. You click the daily button to add automated adjustments and apply time card rules defined in the time card setup that I just showed you a few minutes ago. Entries will be made within a clock event. New rows will not be created. Let's click on daily so you see. Now it's saying no employee selected. Would you like to run it for all? Yes. Now, there are errors here, as you can see. Nobody clocked out. We clocked everybody in, but we couldn't clock them out. So I did that on purpose to show you you can't run your time card routine at the day until everybody's clocked out. So let's close this. And let's change their statuses. He's working. Now he's going home. Clock out. He's working. Now he's going home. Clock out. He's on a break. Let's clock him back in. Then he's working, and let's clock him right back out. Oh, home, clock out. Gotta click a status. And Mary, home, clock out. Now everybody's gone for the day. So now we're ready to actually run the daily calcs. So we click on manage, and we go to the daily calcs on the bottom. No employees selected. Would you like to run it for all employees? Yes. Done. And take a look here. It shows all their calculations. They obviously only worked a fraction of an hour because we're just playing with this. So now, again, we click the daily to add automated adjustments and apply time card rules defined in the time card setup, which we just did here. The entries will be made within a clock event. New rows will not be created. If you don't like the results, you can edit the rules in the setup and run it again. Overrides can be made one time clock event at a time. Now, if the calc daily button, on the bottom here, makes adjustments if the breaks are over 30 minutes, is checked in the time card setup, then the adjustments will be made to clock events in an employee's time card if their break runs over 30 minutes. If you remember, let's go back out a second. Let's go back into setup, time cards. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Yeah, that's right. And on the bottom, we did say calc daily button, the calc daily button, right, which is what we were before in the manage of the time card. If this button is checked as it is, it will make adjustments if the break is over 30 minutes. Since it wasn't, it was like 1 minute, because we're just playing with this, it didn't reflect that. Okay? Now, the clock events that meet the criteria of a rule will have an adjustment, like overtime or differential, applied. The overtime and or differential hours will be transferred from regular time to overtime differential in calculation totals. I think that part is self-explanatory. Daily calculations can also be run per time card by clicking the Calc Daily on the time card for the employee's window. So if we go into an employee's window, we're only on Henry Jones now, not on all employees. And we could click Calc Daily. Okay? Now, on the weekly calculations, let's talk about weekly calculations. You click weekly to add an additional overtime adjustment row for any week. We just did it. That an employee worked more than 40 hours. The default weekly total is for Sunday through Saturday. The weekly start date is set at the Manage module preference. So if you want to change your week, you could go to Manage. Let's see where that is. Hang on. No, I'm in the wrong place. Let's see where we are here. Modules. Okay. And we can change our week there. Let me see. I believe this is it. Manage. Okay, you see that? So you go to Setup, Module Setup, and then you go to Manage tab. And you see how it says Time Card first day of the week for overtime? We're going to leave that as Sunday. Okay? So that's where you'd go for that, to change that if you didn't like that day of the week. Now, the weekly total calculations will cross pay periods. The weekly calculations can also be run per time card by clicking Calc Weekly on the top of the individual employee. So if I went to Manage and I went to Helen Smith, from Helen Smith, just for Helen Smith, I could click on Calc Weekly Overtime. Okay? Now, printing time cards. The time cards will show in a print preview first, then you can send it to the default printer. So if I go to time cards, the next section, you can say print all or print selected. I can just say, I want this one here or this one here. You see how you can select all of them? You can just hold that in like that and select all and drag it. Or I can just say, whoops, I can leave them non-selected and just say print all. This is what I'm going to do. But as you can see here, it'll print 4 pages. See that? 1, 2, 3, 4. And each page is for a separate employee. And it shows the regular time, the overtime, the grid, columns, everything. Now, the time cards will show in a print preview, as I've said. Print all will print all the time cards at once. Print selected will only print the time cards for selected employees. And you could also hit Control while clicking to select multiple employees. Now, let's get back to the payroll reports section on the bottom right. The print grid, I'm going to have that go to a document on a desktop here. I'll make a PDF out of it. It'll actually print onto your printer though. But this is just for the purposes of the demo because you don't see what comes out of my printer. This shows you, and then of course you can control the heading text here. This shows you the total grid for everybody. So it'll basically print the employee time cards grid. If you export the grid, it can export it as a TXT file, that's a text file, to any location on your computer. And when the export's completed, a message will show indicating the file name. So technically, when you get out of this, you could say export grid, and you can take it into the desktop, and it tells you the name of the file. Let me do it a little slower. Let's say the desktop, okay. So it tells you file created, C users, the name of my computer, the desktop, blah, 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 dot text. So you know where you could send that to your accountant, your payroll service, whatever. Export ADP is good because some clients of ours, larger clients especially, you're going to need an ID number. So we didn't put ID numbers in. We didn't need them for internal use. But if you're using ADP, you are going to need the company code plus an employee code, and edit that on the time card for each employee. So I put in 1, 2, 3, I think, on some of them, which is not valid. It's got to be between 51 and 99999, as you can see. But if you're using ADP, you can just refer to those rules. Of course, if there's errors detected, you're going to get a notification. Now, let's talk about holidays and adjustments. Adjustments can be used to add holiday hours or additional overtime, etc. These adjustments create a separate row in the time card. You would click Adjustment, and then, or double click an adjustment to edit. So let's take a look at that. If we go to Manage, and I went in here, you could add an adjustment right there. Okay, so I'm going to manually enter it. If I say today, this time, and let's say it's 1 hour, okay, you can put whatever you like in here, and put whatever note you want in here, and just say, you know, Xmas party, I don't know, maybe you paid people extra money as a bonus, whatever, and make an overtime adjustment. It'll shift it from regular to overtime, and okay, you can make any kind of special adjustments, as you see. So manually entered is the typical selection, but if the reason we do this, it protects this adjustment from being deleted in the next pay period. So you could again set the time and the hours of that adjustment, and it'll appear in the date order on the time card, as we saw. And of course, you can enter the number of hours. Now, if this is an adjustment to account for overtime, you would click that box right here, which I did. If not, then not. And if it is overtime, it'll transfer from regular to overtime. Okay. Hours calculations. The math behind the time card hour calculation is as follows. The total hours, okay, which is this column, is equal to all hours worked, including regular, overtime, and differential, which is the rate 2 hours. Right here, which in this case is nothing. Overtime, of course, is the overtime hours, as you see here. Rate 1 is the regular job, 9 to 5 hours worked. The rate 1 hours, okay, so if I look at the time card, let's see, if I go to here and I view his time card, okay, so the rate 1 hours are going to be 1 minus the rate 2 divided by the total hours times the regular hours. It's a little complicated, but it works. The rate 2 hours is 1 minus the rate 2 divided by the total hours minus the rate 1 hours. So the rate 2 hours plus the rate 1 hours are equal to the regular hours. I know it sounds complicated, but it really is not. And that pretty much sums up how to handle time cards. If you have questions, you can obviously review this video again, because it is pretty detailed. Thank you very much.